Hi, this is Ian Wright, and today I want to talk about managing fear in an age of anxiety. And really, I suppose this is a response to the kind of crazy times we're living in with the uncertainty caused by coronavirus, etc., etc. The interesting thing about it is that its effect on, I think, everyone's general psyche is this kind of nagging fear at the back of the head, because it triggers and it links in with very important kind of fundamental elements within us as humans, which is to do with survival. And it brings up these really deep unconscious fears, the fear of the unknown, the fear of death, the fear of illness in friends and family, the fear of economic instability. But the biggest trigger actually in anxiety is a feeling of uncertainty. And feeling uncertainty is when we don't know what's going to happen. It's unknown. And once we know a potential situation or how it's going to be, we can prepare and react. And actually our nervous systems tend to settle down. That part of our brain that deals with anxiety and unconscious reactions to situations, called the amygdala. It's a very important part of the brain because it reacts before we can consciously react to a situation. It was beautifully designed, especially in the days where we were dealing as a species with predators like wild animals, lions, etc., so that our bodies, we can respond before we think about it. We immediately respond. So the amygdala is designed to engage with threat, so visual threat or threat through hearing, through our senses. Boom, wires straight into the amygdala, and we respond. And the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis, engages, and we have this fight, flight, fright response, which is modulated by things like adrenaline and norepinephrine. So this is our direct response to threat, and it means we react quickly. And it was wonderful in those days it saved our lives because we'd run or we'd fight or we'd whatever. But the problem is nowadays we are caught in a pattern really where this part of our brain is triggered all the time on a low level, and sometimes it can become quite agitated, quite facilitated, and it can cause this low grade anxiety fear response, or a very extreme anxiety fear response in anxiety disorders. So I mean, how do we address this? This is a very huge subject. But I'm just going to give you a few tricks to disengage this pattern, especially at this time, just to work with it. I'm going to expand this because I've just written actually a book, so it's a very familiar subject to me, which is, I've written a book which I call Anxiety Breaks, and we're talking to one or two publishers, but I decided actually this morning that actually that's not the way to go. The way to go is to make it as an online or an ebook or an online course. So because people, I think, want to hear someone talking. It's much nicer, especially when you're feeling anxious, not to actually read about it. It's much more, in my view, easy to listen to someone talking about it and hopefully be calming and talk people through when they're feeling anxious, and find specific exercises. The book is around a sequence of processes and practices and exercises which act to rewire the brain when it becomes, literally rewire that kind of anxiety response when it gets set up in the brain. And I use certain techniques as brakes on this anxiety response. Anyway, that should be coming out, I would say. I just have to get it videoed, the practices, and do the audio book side of it. And hopefully I want to give 3 months for that. But if you check the Dynamics of Stillness website, there's over 200 podcasts there actually, and there's a whole sequence on managing anxiety within those podcasts. So if you need more work, and if this kind of work suits you, but let's just engage with some practices, some common sense practices, which can kind of downregulate that response. So what happens, as I said, in an anxiety or a fear response is the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, gets stimulated, and adrenaline and similar neurotransmitters are released and hormones, and we have this response in our body, heart rate, pulse rate goes up, sweating, dry mouth, the usual symptoms that we attribute to a kind of a stress response. Now, let's just deal with if we're feeling immediately fearful in the moment or stressed. Okay, what we're going to do here is we're going to learn how to engage with the vagal nerve. The vagal nerve acts as a counterbalance in this system. So if the HPA axis gets agitated, the vagal complex actually works to downregulate that and bring it into a harmonious balance. Now, there's a very simple way of stimulating vagal tone, which can be calming, and that is to breathe out more than we breathe in. So if we take a breath in through our nose, so we breathe in 1, 2, and then we breathe out, hold it half a second, and then breathe out. You breathe out for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 if you can. Breathe in for 2, breathe out for 4. And as you breathe out, another trick is to relax your body on the out breath. Soften your body, let go of any tension on that out breath, and then breathe in fresh air. And as you breathe out, you relax and you soften and you ground and you calm. Okay, that's really good. Actually, the best thing to do is if you're feeling fearful or anxious, just sit down, tune into your breathing, increase your out breath, and relax on the out breath. Now that stimulates the vagal nerve, which calms down the HPA axis in the moment. That's a starting point. That's a very physiological way of doing it. Then I think we need to engage the prefrontal cortex, the conscious part of the brain, the part of the brain that regulates the rest of our nervous system now. It's the newest part of the brain. Mankind. This is about rational thinking. So I think it's very important, and it's actually clear that if we employ rational thinking, it's like what's happening is there's an unconscious reaction that's happening in our brains where our amygdala is triggering our nervous system to react and get into a kind of wired state. If we apply some rational conscious thinking to it, for example, if you're talking about the coronavirus, the reality is when they really add up how many people actually have it in relationship to how much mortality, I think it's going to be far less than 1%. I'm not be sure that's my guesstimate, because I think people don't know the true figures. But most people have little or no symptom at all. And this is a reality check. And I think it's very important to create a reality check, not to belittle the importance of it, because it is a very important thing and we have to take certain steps to manage this. And it's huge. But we need to keep reminding ourselves that actually we're going to mostly be okay. And it's okay mostly. Okay, so actually bringing in a state of reality down-regulates this amygdala fear, anxiety response, and I think that's very important. You can do that any kind of situation. For example, if you're fearful about something going on in the future, some unknown event, that could happen potentially, you have to bring in a sense of reality. And look, actually, the reality is this is highly unlikely. It's possible, but it's highly unlikely. And I think that kind of rational thinking applied consciously is very important. It's very obvious, really. But we don't tend to do that. We don't sit there and work with it. And that, in a way, it remodels our thinking about it. And it's very important, I think. Another very important thing to do is not to fight, actually to become conscious of how we're feeling. So if we're feeling this nagging feeling of fear in the back of our minds about whatever it is, we sit down, we breathe a little bit, as I said before, we become conscious. Okay, what am I actually worrying about here? I'm worrying about uncertainty, economic stuff, illness, family, whatever it is. And just allow yourself to feel those fears. There's something very magic about allowing yourself to feel something. As soon as you allow yourself and you're conscious of it, that allowing allows it to soften, allows it to breathe. It softens it around the edges so it doesn't have a grip on us anymore. So become conscious. Okay, I'm feeling fearful, but that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a natural response. So when we fight our fears increase. It's a crazy thing. If we allow them and say it's okay, that immediately softens it. And we have to practice that, I think. It's very important. Now, from a slightly more spiritual perspective, I think it's nice to look at. I mean, I'm very enamored with some of the Buddhist teachings on groundlessness, the state that actually, the idea that actually there is no certainty. And it's a false sense of security to realize that there's any certainty. Life is uncertain. That is the only certainty in life, is that it's uncertain. And the only other certainty in life is that we will die. And the Tibetan monks, would spend, when they're young monks, would spend days, weeks, months meditating at a funeral pyres. So they would become aware and understand that they will die. And that's okay. And that's the point. It's okay. We're all going to die. It doesn't matter. So having that understanding and that consciousness that it's okay means, and the purpose of that in Buddhism is so that we can choose to actually be fully alive. It's not really about death. It's about being fully alive. So we can feel fully alive and connected in the moment. And there's something very valuable in that teaching if you think about it. Another response, of course, to feelings of fear and anxiety is we tend in our minds to isolate. And when we isolate, it increases the story. We isolate ourselves in our minds, and it's the wrong thing to do. It's just a part of a reaction, actually, a pre-conscious reaction that we have. And we need to address that, again, through consciousness. Now, if you look back to my previous podcast, which is called Loving Kindness Practice, this is really a really lovely technique to overcome feelings of fear and anxiety, proven in multiple dimensions, because it increases feelings of empathy, connection, oneness. And when we feel more empathy, we feel like we're all in this together, and we feel connected, we decrease our sense of anxiety. Anxiety can be a very personal thing, even though it could be a global thing. And if we share, are connected, and use this as an opportunity for increasing our compassion and our empathy, it can be hugely healing, I think. So this is a really simple introduction to some of the themes, and in the anxiety breaks I go through a whole sequence of practices which develop each on the last, which can help us really literally try and rewire the brain when there is strong anxiety or anxiety disorders, etc., and their processes and practices, and all kind of research with relation to engaging different parts of the brain to overcome an anxious reaction. Anyway, more of that to come, and check the website Dynamics of Stillness as to when that's actually going to be released, and it'll hopefully be in 3 months' time. But in the meantime, I wish you well, and I actually wish you peace.